Want more Gators Breakdown? Join Gators Breakdown Plus. Starting at $3 a month, get access to unique episodes, plus a blog, chat room, giveaways, shout-outs, and more. Gators Breakdown Plus is furthering the interaction with fans and listeners like you. Head to gatorsbreakdown.supportingcast.fm to join Gators Breakdown Plus today. Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
But all right, let's get started. Of course, decided to do this chat with Gators Breakdown Plus members, mainly because Florida has made their wide receiver coach hire. In one, the return of Billy Gonzalez to Gainesville, his third stint in Gainesville, of course. Once under Urban Meyer, once under Dan Mullen, and now under Billy Napier. So, you guys, remember I threw his name up in the chat much before many others did out there. They'll let you guys know that this was a possibility of happening. He was going to get interviewed, and probably comes a little bit later than we thought it would. But Billy Gonzalez is now going to be the wide receiver coach, taking over for Kerry Colbert, and it's been pretty polarizing. Out there on Twitter, right here in the Gators Breakdown Plus Discord, I know a lot of people have already kind of said what they have to say, but now we can do it in conversation form, a little bit of back and forth here with Gators Breakdown Plus members. Right here in this Discord chat. We can also bring up the news as well of Florida announcing today that the Utah game will be now on the opening Thursday of week 1 of college football, August 31st. Florida-Utah game not on a Saturday, going to be that Thursday night, the opening week of college football. So I know that's a pretty polarizing topic as well. Hey, we can get to some spring storylines. I've been bringing you guys all kind of spring practice coverage, all the press conferences, thoughts on what the coaches and players have to say, and some news and notes and nuggets from the first week of spring practice. So I think we got plenty to get into right here on this chat. But if anybody wants to hop in, go ahead. Give me your thoughts on Billy Gonzalez and the hire of him taking over for Kerry Colbert, wide receiver coach. I'll go ahead and tell you, I don't mind the hire. I like it in a lot of ways. I get the worry. I get the reservations here because of how it ended with Mullen and that staff. I think that was more to do with the head man than anybody else, mostly with that staff there. And the track record does speak for itself in a lot of ways with Billy Gonzalez and the Van Jeffersons and the Kadarius Toney, Kyle Pitts in some ways. He was working out with the receivers a bit during the early portions of his Florida tenure there at the same time. So the development of one Kadarius Toney probably speaks higher than a lot of what Billy Gonzalez has done in his career. Kadarius Toney coming in as a quarterback, not really a wide receiver, and progressed to be one of the SEC's best receivers, one of the country's best receivers now in the NFL, making plays as well. So I think that's probably the feather in the cap there for, at least recently, there for Billy Gonzalez. But, the guys that were here, Freddie Swain, Josh Hammond, making them better when he comes in as well. In that 2018 season. Kyle Trask eventually takes over in 2019. The passing game explodes. You see more plays from the wide receivers when they get better quarterback play at the same time. So, and a long history at Florida too, dating back to Urban and Percy and Riley Cooper, David Nelson. Those receivers there in the Jamal Cornelius early on in the early Urban Meyer tenure, just Bubba Caldwell. So you can names keep going on in that time, but of course, a long lineage there, at least in orange and blue, Florida Gator uniforms that you can point to there for Billy Gonzalez. So I like the hire. Of course, still, only one season away from Florida with the transition from Billy Napier. From Dan Mullen to Billy Napier. So still got the landscape of recruiting here in the state of Florida. He was in Florida at Florida Atlantic last year as well. Tom Herman doesn't retain him after Billy Napier doesn't retain him last year. Of course, that's an interesting storyline. Didn't retain him, but does come back a year later and brings back Billy Gonzalez. So There's many angles to go with this. I know recruiting is going to be a big angle here. The development hasn't necessarily been an issue. Recruiting, of course, a bit of an issue. And the higher rated wide receivers he did bring in the last stint at Florida, your Jacob Copeland, your Xavier Henderson, your Marcus Burke. Copeland never really reached his potential. Xavier Henderson, maybe this coming up last year, he gets to go around with Billy Gonzalez one more time. Maybe we see some more there. And of course, we're still waiting on Marcus Burke to break out as well. Most of his development at Florida, your Van Jeffersons, your Kadarius Tonys lately were receivers he did not bring in. And your Josh Hammonds, your Freddie Swains. He developed those guys, but not the receivers that he recruited and necessarily brought in. So, like I said, there's plenty of angles to come out with this one with Billy Gonzalez, but I like the hire. We'll see where it goes for Florida. But if you guys, Gators Breakdown Plus members, want to hop in, give your thoughts, go right ahead.
I like the hire too, Dave. I mean, given the timing of the situation, right here, losing Kerry Colbert right before spring ball. I mean, if our options are Derek Doker or a GA Derek Doker or Billy Gonzalez, and give me Billy all day.
Yeah, that's a good point there too. With Decker's name kind of being
Decker, excuse me, yes.
Yeah, but the name that come out just because a hire hasn't been made. There's been some time now, and hey, what are we waiting on? And I think some people were getting the worry that it may be an elevation of somebody within the staff there, and David Decker being that name there, coaching these receivers the first week basically of spring practice. But as I said, there were plenty of interviews happening, plenty of names we have thrown about in the last 2 weeks now, and ends up being one that that I threw out here early on in the process that let you guys know that Billy Gonzalez was a serious candidate, and ends up being him in the end.
Well, honestly, I don't think it can be understated that the head coach matters the most in recruiting, right? Like when Billy Gonzalez was under Meyer, I don't think he really had a problem getting in high-tier guys. And then Mullen comes in. He does good the first year with Copeland, but then, gets a few more good guys here and there. But I honestly, I think his recruiting by more with Mullen than anyone else. So we'll see what he does under Napier.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. One of the main things I brought up when his name was originally brought up a couple of weeks ago, and made sure I tweeted out today too, is like, I get the recruiting side of it. You guys know how much we talk about it right here on Gators Breakdown and here on Gators Breakdown Plus, and just the process of recruiting under Dan Mullen toward the end. It was just the process behind the scenes was not pretty. Wide receiver recruiting, probably some of that, but I think if we take a step back and look, and I forgot who posted it in here, but you look at the names, and it was Isaiah Bond, Jaden Gibson, Chandler Smith that Florida and the previous staff did have committed before Billy Napier was hired, and he decided to basically wipe the slate clean with his transition class. But those were three receivers. They were all not the big body possession receiver types. Those were playmaker type of receivers there that, there was that reputation of it's only going to be the big body receivers here under Dan Mullen, under Billy Gonzalez. But those three receivers there, not necessarily known as that big body possession receiver type. So maybe it was changing because maybe the offense was changing a bit under Dan Mullen, but, moving away from the spread more to a passing attack and maybe recruiting receivers that way. So, you can even point toward the end of Billy Gonzalez's tenure under Dan Mullen that, the receiver types were changing just a bit. So, every offer for recruiting goes through Billy Napier. So, no doubt of my mind that I think recruiting is going to be, the process is going to be a bit different than it was under Dan Mullen. And, if there is the thought and narrative of lollygagging or not taking recruiting serious under the previous staff, of course, I think that's going to change with Billy Gonzalez and Billy Napier. Anybody else want to hop in on the Billy Gonzalez hire? You guys usually aren't this shy.
I guess everybody said what they had to say in the actual chat.
in the chat that's been going on, yeah. I did have to tease that earlier. It was pretty polarizing. It was exciting.
I would also say excuse me, Dave. But anyone who wants to to bring up his final 2 years, how maybe the production dropped off under Mullen. I mean, there's a 2020. I would say 2020 was when Mullen pretty much checked out. So I can't really blame any of the staff members. When the head coach, you pretty much he sets the example for everyone.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect of checking back in, I guess, would probably be the way to put that after the 2020 season and everything that was going on there, of course, and the way that season played out. And, we saw a lot of good with that offense. And, your Kyle Pitts and your Kadarius Tonys and Trevon Grimes and, Justin Shorter that year. Of course, that offense taking off and Billy Gonzalez being a huge part of that. But we know toward the end of that season and everything that played on and through 2020 and 2021, not necessarily the best. And, was it easy I guess it wasn't easy, maybe, if the thought is to check back in once the head man himself kind of checked out, So I do think that can be bled down into the assistants and stuff. So, look, I get it. It is a polarizing topic there with Billy Gonzalez, because of who he was under last time. And, it's more of a, not take the easy way out. We'll have to wait and see, of course. But, Ryan, going back to one of your earlier points, the timing of this, being on the NFL timeline with Kerry Colbert getting hired. And, look, of course, we all would love to have Brian Hartline from Ohio State come in and be the wide receiver coach, OC, whatever, however you could get him here. But that wasn't going to happen. So I think we take a step back and realistically look at this. In the end, I think it's a pretty good hire there for the Gators. So, of course, I mean, we heard all the names. Former Gators, Dallas Baker, name being brought up. Ike Hilliard, coaching at Auburn last year. So many. I'm trying to go through the list here because I remember having it. I want to make sure I didn't leave anybody out of the whole list that we had. Of course, you had the hire of Russ Callaway at tight end and. Him being young and trying to step up, maybe having somebody there with experience here with Billy Gonzalez, not on the bad side of this either. But, some guys we were pointing to had some NFL background. Phil McGagan was a name that was brought up last week. NFL background, coached at Colorado last year. Deion Sanders doesn't keep him around. He ends up in college football because he took a year off of personal leave in the NFL, found his way to get back into coaching in the college ranks there at Colorado. His name was the hot name last week, but Joe Fulani, Taylor Stubblefield, Joe Daly, Dallas Baker, Ike Hilliard, Tony Sorrentino. Those were names we were all hearing over the last couple of weeks, and it almost seemed like it was really close with Phil McGagan. Now, I don't know what happened there. I'm not going to pretend to know what happened there. It seemed like that one was pretty close, but not sure. Not sure what happened. So Billy Gonzalez was, as I said, not retained from Tom Herman and that FAU staff. He was hired recently as the tight end coach at Marshall, but finds his way to Gainesville before he gets stabbed. I guess that's the interesting angle too. Why not another Power 5 job? I think what we go back and point to for Billy Gonzalez, I think was probably worthysome of a Power 5 job. Maybe staying in the state of Florida, was that a priority at all last year going to FAU? But of course, I just said he was at Marshall, so I'm not sure why. If I can understand for some of those Mullen staff members not getting Power 5 jobs, and Billy's G, I thought there was enough credit there where he could get a Power 5 job. But I think that's something that's interesting to look at too. Is why no other big time coaches reaching out for Billy Gonzalez.
It's interesting that C-Rob gets a Power 5 job, and we were all kind of weary on him. And Billy, just kind of goes off to Marshall, you said?
FAU last year, and then Marshall as the tight end coach.
Ain't that a trip?
Yeah, you're right. It is, Christian Robinson getting hired probably a bit for those recruiting chops. But as we said, the development wasn't necessarily there. Maybe the opposite right here with Billy Gonzalez in some ways of developing, but not necessarily I mean, the recruiting wasn't bad. It's just, we were still waiting on the development of a Jacob Copeland, a Marcus Burke, an Xavier Henderson. And now, what can he do? I mean, I'm excited to see what he can do with an Andy Jean and an Aiden Mizell and a Eugene Wilson. 1 year with Ricky Pearsall coming up this year. I mean, if we get the best of what we have seen recently from Billy Gonzalez, I mean, this is a good move in my opinion. But we do have to at least get that Billy Gonzalez that came in here in 2008 and made Freddie Strain a much better wide receiver, eventually making Kadarius Toney a wide receiver. I mean, that's at the bare minimum, that's the Billy Gonzalez we have to see in Gainesville under Billy Napier.
Well, that Billy Gonzalez was 15 years younger, so.
No, I meant 2018. When he makes that, when he comes in and makes Freddie Swain better.
18, yeah. I thought you said 08.
No. That his most recent stint under Mullen.
Well, and really the only bad thing we can really say about the receiver room was 2020, but Emory Jones was the quarterback. So I don't know how much you can lay at Billy Gonzalez's feet for Emory Jones just not panning out.
That was 21. 2020 was
21.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, that offense was absolutely hindered by quarterback play. So that you're right. That does play into it. And maybe even last year to a point too. I mean, there were times we saw receivers open. I mean, Jaquavion Frazier's is the name Billy Gonzalez brings in. He'll reunite with Jaquavion Frazier's. Did not, like I said, reunite with Xavier Henderson coming up this year as well, Marcus Burke. But, now get some new faces as well. Won't get to reunite with Jamarcus Weston. Jamarcus Weston's now on the defensive side of the ball playing safety. But that was another, recruit there. That Dan Mullen really talked up a whole lot, but we didn't necessarily see, Jamarcus Weston ever break through. So, I mean, we'll see. Hopefully some better quarterback play lends itself. I mean, kind of going back to the Felipe Franks, Kyle Trask, we could already tell Freddie Swain, Josh Hammond, Van Jefferson, Trevon Grimes. That was okay in 2018 with Felipe Franks, but that's still, we didn't see the full potential of those wide receivers until Kyle Trask comes in. So, of course, quarterback play is going to lend itself to these wide receivers making bigger plays as well.
Can you hear me?
Got you, Bull.
Okay. I don't know. Perhaps the lack of communication is from the people is because they it's a little underwhelming, like you said in your earlier post. I wouldn't call this a home run hire, but far from disappointed. I think that's a general consensus we got from the chat earlier, was that it's not a bad hire, but I think we may have. I don't want to be negative towards Billy because he has done some great things here, but it's not. Kerry Colbert, I think, was a better wide receiver coach, and everybody was pretty happy with that. And that Billy had the opportunity to keep Billy Napier had the opportunity to keep Billy Gonzalez, but instead I think he did trade up to Colbert. Now that Colbert's gone, maybe Billy Gonzalez was always his second choice.
It could have been. Also, maybe it was a look of completely cleaning house last year, and that happened. But a year later, bringing him back, I would like to know, and I'll ask around and see if I can find out more about that dynamic of maybe why not keep him here and then bring him back a year later. As you said, it would be interesting to know was there some thought to keeping him last year, but just completely cleaning house. But then a year later, kind of reassessing, and if he was going to keep somebody last year, maybe Billy Gonzalez would have been one. Christian Robinson's name, bringing him back up, was a name that was under consideration for staying as well. But yeah, that's I do think that's a angle to this that is pretty interesting.
And he may have made the change for recruiting. Colbert's probably a better recruiter overall, especially he's a little younger, right? I mean, I imagine he is. I don't know how much younger, but I mean, for this day and age, he probably wanted to, on top of, like you said, completely cleaning house, he wanted somebody that he felt would be a little bit more aggressive in the recruiting.
Yeah, now got a lay of the land as far as recruiting goes, what it takes. NIL is going to be a huge factor in this too. And Billy Gonzalez hasn't, it's only been the one big, when NIL's played a huge factor for Florida recruiting going back to the 2023 cycle. So it'd be Billy Gonzalez's first time under Billy Napier and under the big influence of NIL in recruiting as well. Hey, if it's all about money, maybe it doesn't matter too much who the wide receiver coach is. Let's move on. And what are you guys' thoughts on Florida Utah now on the opening Thursday night, week 1 of college football?
Boo, hiss.
Yeah, is there any particular reason for that?
I'm assuming, and since this is the Pac-12 move, that this is either a Fox or FS1 play here to get eyeballs on their network that Thursday night. So I think when you look at it, their rare chance of getting to show off an SEC team that's going to bring some eyeballs, that I think they would probably want they're going to want the spotlight on that game. So this is under the agreement, I think should be a Fox or a FS1 game. So that's, I think, playing a whole lot into this. I think, probably should have been, I think the clause was in the contract the whole time that they could move this to a Thursday night. In my opinion, it should have just been, part of Scott Strickland's and the administration to now maybe they don't care, but I think from the fan perspective, wanting to keep this game on Saturday, make sure that hey, let's keep this game. Let's make sure this game is played on Saturday, and the networks and the Pac-12 couldn't do this.
Well, I live in Colorado, so I was planning on going to that game. And I was super excited because it's like the closest Florida game, and till basically Oklahoma comes. So now I'm definitely not going to get to go because it's on a Thursday. So I'd have to take 3 consecutive days off of work, and that's just not in the cards. So
from things that I've seen written, it was always in the contract, and the Pac-12 wanted it because, or maybe Fox, and this is because ACC already has the Friday night game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be Pac-12 SEC on Thursday night, ACC versus I forget whom on Friday night, and then the regular slate beginning that following Saturday. So that's exactly what you said, Dave. They want eyes on it, and that's how they figure they're going to get the most if they put it on a Thursday night. I'm sure if there was another game on Thursday, maybe we'd be playing on Wednesday. Who knows?
Or move it to week 0 like they did Florida Miami that one year. But it is. And I'm reading the article even now from the Utah side, and it doesn't say anything about a network. But I'm pretty sure it's a Fox FS1 thing here, and not ESPN. I think unless the Pac-12, the conference gets to make that decision, I would think ESPN would want to keep it on a Saturday. I think, but and like I said, unless it's just the Pac-12 making that decision, but I'm pretty sure the Pac-12 making that decision on behalf of the TV network, and I'm pretty sure Fox FS1, wherever Fox wants to place that game, will be, Florida Utah on that Thursday night.
I hope it's at 10:30.
That's an interesting side of this too. It could be a later kickoff just because of that.
Oh, my mic was on.
Oh, good. If that's that was your comment anyway, so it fits.
Very relevant.
Yeah. First time, long time, Dave. I'm taking the dog for a walk.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's how these things happen, Because I'm trying to see. I know I put in the chat earlier The football schedule for week 1, not really all that good, but I'm trying to now see who's on that Thursday night, if it could be a late kickoff. That's a good thought.
Well, that Saturday's pretty loaded too, right? FSU, LSU, and there's some other.
FSU, LSU is actually that Sunday, so we don't have to worry
okay.
about. Don't have to worry about that game. That Thursday, Nebraska, Minnesota, and I'm sure that's going to be a Fox game. So there you go. If Fox does play into this, Nebraska, Nebraska could be your early game. Florida, Utah could be a late game.
I think Big Ten Network likes to throw that first.
Oh, you're right. That could be. Yep, that could be Big Ten Network. Yep.
Or one could be Fox.
One could be
FS1.
Right, there you go.
Yeah,
that's
exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah, that was my next. You could have a split of Fox and FS1. So, I think we got to see what. I mean, I know the Pac-12 has an agreement with ESPN as well. The late night, they get a lot of those late night games, so it could be an ESPN game still. But I'm thinking Fox, FS1 have a role in this too.
I have an adjacent question, Dave.
Yeah.
If you know. Will Cam Rising be playing in that game? Will he be recovered?
I think that's a good question. Don't know how far along he is in his rehab right now. But now, I mean, of course, I don't think that window probably isn't all that great. But now, I mean, there's 2 days that he doesn't get to. It's 2 days shorter now that he gets to get ready for this game. So I don't know if that plays into it at all or not. I can't imagine 2 days. It's going to be all that big of a difference. But overall, for that game, still a big storyline. We can really look out for.
They lost their 2 big tight ends, correct?
Keithy came back.
Oh, Keefe did come back.
Yes.
We had a problem with him.
Yep. But he did come back. Now I'm really just searching for if there's any inclination this could be a Fox FS1 game. So,
Dave, I think this is where Mertz's experience is going to come in huge because they've got an elite defense. They're bringing back almost everybody. They probably have the best nose tackle in the country. It's going to be and now it's a night game in Salt Lake City. I mean, you can't put much of a harder task in front of Mertz than this.
Yeah, good point. I did bring up his experience paying off, especially compared to Jack Miller, and that you're right. That is a good side of this. He will not be. Don't get me wrong. I know you playing at Baton Rouge and Death Valley, LSU. There's very rare. Nothing's like that. Hardly anything is like that in college football. At the same time, he's played in those Big Ten stadiums and those games. He's not going to be. He's not going to be shell shocked. Now he could be surprised by LSU, and it could be a little bit different, but he's not going to be shell shocked. It's not going to be his first time playing in front of 100,000 screaming fans. And now, the first game of the season, Utah, the same way. It's going to be an electric atmosphere there in Salt Lake City. But you're right. He himself, it's going to be business as usual for him. He's not going to be taken aback by the spotlight being on him in that game.
And I mean, with their front, it's just going to be hard to run against them. So he might have to throw a lot.
Yeah, good point. We'll see what this, how this offense plays out. I like what Florida brings back up front, and the running backs are a big episode for the running backs today on Gators Breakdown. But yeah, you're right. He's gonna have to make some plays, and throughout the season, this run game, there's gonna be times it's gonna be tough for him, and Utah's probably an opponent where they are gonna have to prove their worth a bit, and I'm sure Utah's gonna make Graham Mertz beat them based off of his history. So I can see them, just loading up the box and just making it difficult just based on pure numbers alone for most of the night for Florida and making Graham Mertz go on the road and beat them.
Has Mertz ever lost on a Thursday night in that time zone? I don't think so.
There we go.
I think Mertz will be fine, honestly. That stadium does not look that big, and the Big Ten has some powerhouse stadiums, Happy Valley, the Horseshoe, the Big House. Like, it's no joke playing going on the road in the Big Ten. So I don't think Mertz will have any problem with the Utah crowd.
I mean, let's just look at it. Let's just go back to 2021 for Wisconsin. I'm not counting 2020, of course, because the stadiums weren't full. But let's see.
And by the way, Dave, I just looked it up. There's 9 games on August 31st.
Yeah.
And ours is by far the biggest. And like you pointed out, Nebraska, Minnesota is number 2. And then it's a big a bunch of mediocre teams versus mediocre teams.
Yeah. Let's see. They played Michigan in 21, but that was at Wisconsin. Man, so in 21, he didn't really play. They played Notre Dame, but that was looks like a neutral site for, I guess, quote-unquote neutral site versus Notre Dame in Chicago. So, not really they played Penn State, but they opened up versus Penn State at home. So, he hasn't played, maybe, did I misspeak? Let's see, in 22, which would have been last year, played at Nebraska. Yeah, maybe I just assumed it. Never mind, played at Ohio State. There we go. September 24th last year. Lost 52-21. But yeah, so there you go. Playing at Ohio State, yeah. LSU, the big stadium, Utah, not going to be his first rodeo. LSU, different, of course. But, did play at Ohio State last year. I'm kind of
have success in the run game, then it won't be on Mertz's shoulders to
Yeah.
go up and win it.
Yeah. Going on that, I guess I'll look for a silver lining. At least on that Saturday, we get to watch the other games now. But then I was looking at that week 1 schedule for that Saturday. There's not that many great games. South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee and Virginia, TCU, Colorado, Boise State, Washington. Just not that many great games that first week.
I tell you, I want to see that Colorado TCU game just for the spectacle of it.
Dion's first game.
All the more to have our game on Saturday.
Yeah, so I'm saying there's just not that many good games that Saturday, so it wouldn't have broken. Last year we had Florida and Utah, Georgia, Oregon, Bama. No, never mind. Bama, Texas was week 2. There were a lot of other good games. But they were so good I can't remember them.
The only one that matters.
Well, hopefully we get to bask in Saturday of already having a big win. Any spring storylines you guys want to talk about? Been pretty busy with the press conferences and, as I said, the running game, running backs, Jabbar Jaluk, ETN, Montrell Johnson just put up that episode today. So it's a lot of good stuff there. Armstrong seemed to really impress, for talking season anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. I was impressed with what he had with his talking.
I want a defensive coordinator that negotiates with a hammer.
I figured out the formula. You want all your offensive people to be from up north and all your defensive people to be from down south.
There you go.
Yeah, works for me.
Whatever wins.
But
man.
our head coach is from the South, too. He's also an offensive guy, so.
Allegedly.
Bull Gator with the zing.
Dude, I'd only hire coaches from Ohio.
Yeah, there you go.
What's Jim Tressel doing these days?
Baseball's up 4-2 if anybody gives a flip.
There we go.
Who
But
we
yeah,
playing?
on
You
Aust-
know.
yeah, on Austin Armstrong. I mean, the age is probably the biggest detriment. But of course, not green. Called defenses the last 2 years at Southern Miss, and I think really impressive with the in front of the microphone. And now you've heard players kind of share how exuberant he is out there at practice, and getting them hyped up, and he's running everywhere. And I know I didn't. I mean, I don't think you have to be that way to be successful, but maybe the change, and I think even Billy Napier kind of said it's different than what Patrick Toney and how he approached it, and now we'll see if that bleeds over into game day for as far as the hype and the excitement that that Armstrong can kind of shed along to his players. So it's that approach, the aggressive approach, his mannerisms, the way he carries himself. I think it certainly looked different, and hopefully different means better. Doesn't always mean that, but hopefully with this, some more experience in this same system. The system's not changing all that much. I think all this kind of paired together. I mean, we can't go into every year saying it just has to be better. I mean, we can say that. We said that for years about the Florida offense, and just went year by year by year by year until finally it fixed itself. For this defense, I hate to say it, but eventually it has to get better. But wait and see, I guess.
Well, it seems that Billy has a type when it comes to defensive coordinator. Young, up and coming guys with what appears to be bright futures. But I remember when they first brought in Toney, one of the big complaints was his youth. And now Armstrong is 6 years younger than Toney?
Saban wanted him for a reason.
As linebackers coach. Now, true, it wasn't as a assistant. It was on field, but still.
Yeah, but speaking of Saban, though, I mean, if you look at Kirby Smart's resume when he was DC, he had 1 year of coaching defensive at Valdosta State, a couple years position coach. I mean, you do a blind resume comparison, Kirby and Austin Armstrong, pretty much the exact same resume. About the same age, too.
Yeah, I was about to say, what was Kirby's age when
he was like 32, maybe 33.
Yeah.
If you want to have some fun, look at Valdosta State's coaching staff.
Oh, I know.
Years. It's insane.
I mean, I grew up in South Georgia, so it was always, it was always in the back of my mind. And of course, in the mid to late '90s, and it was the air raid, and you had Mummy and Mike Leach, and it was really popular the Valdosta State coaching tree. Especially starting about the mid to late '90s, right there. So it's kind of always been, and seeing people stem from that coaching tree always sticks in the back of my mind because I grew up around it a bit. But it is interesting, and Billy Napier finally brought it up. I have said it a couple of times, but Billy Napier kind of finally, publicly, I won't necessarily say admitting, but at least bringing it up publicly of the little coaching tree and coaching circle that him, Kirby Smart, and Nick Saban have. So, there's a lot of sharing of ideas, sharing coaches, and I think pretty interesting aspect of it. Billy Napier nowhere near the reputation of those two guys right now, but he certainly has put himself in the right company. Of course, that did not help one Will Muschamp as a head coach, but he's certainly in the right company and got his identification of the young up and comers in this coaching circle, and hopefully it pays off. Anything else catch your guys' eyes or interest through spring ball so far?
I kind of like just like through those 4 days, I kind of like hearing that both sides of the football are making plays instead of it being like very one-sided. I mean, like, of course, like as somebody with Graham Mertz coming in and Jack Miller, we saw a little bit of a glimpse of what he could do in the bowl game. Not much with no offensive line help, but it's nice to see that, both sides of the football are making plays, even though that you hear about interceptions and all that other kind of stuff. But it hasn't been like anything that's been. I mean, you get your fair share of touchdown catches and passes, and you're getting your big rushes from Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne in those practices. So it's kind of like a balanced. It's also just the beginning too, but it's kind of the spring practice to me has kind of been balanced on both sides of the football. What you say?
From what I can glean, Dave, yeah, I think so. Kind of what I'm hearing as well. You've heard interesting that I've heard some, the safeties, Wilson and Miguel Mitchell, getting in on the interceptions and the turnovers. And I'm also hearing the big runs by the running backs as well. Cam Carroll, throw him into the mix as well as hitting some big runs there for the Gators. And Cam Jackson has probably been one of, if not the top defensive player I've heard of so far on the as far as the transfers go and as far as defensive line go, and maybe just one person that's being pointed out over and over again is just kind of how disruptive he is up front, and that's good news. Good news for Florida. And I'm not, of course, you bring him up and it's like, okay, well, who's he going against on the offensive line? Who might be struggling there? I mean, like you said, it's checks and balances. You got to weigh both sides of this here. You got to take the good with the bad. Good news for the defense doesn't necessarily mean bad news for the offense, though. At the same time, it's as bad as this defense has been, I think that's the way a lot of people would lean. But at the same time, I just we're going to hear good about certain players that it needs to translate into hopefully the spring game and the fall camp and then the real games when it comes around. But there's going to be some names that we hear about this spring that we do not see show up in the fall. It happens. It happened last year with Lorenzo Lingard, and he never came to fruition as a contributor at running back too much for Florida, and it's probably going to happen again this spring. But the one name I am hearing a whole lot of for defense is just how disruptive Cam Jackson is so far up front.
Yeah, what do you think about Andy Jean and how he's progressed? Not even really progressed, just came in. I mean, you see him on film and he's moving, and he's made some plays there in spring practice. Probably not as many plays as obviously as Cameron Jackson, but you can kind of see on film where he has that elusive speed. His cuts are so quick. It's like somebody referred to him as Van Jefferson, but from what I've seen on film and just him running routes, I'm just like, wow, he's probably going to be special.
Yeah, he's probably getting a lot more credit for his speed than I thought. I didn't know he was that fast. And I know he's run track and has been in that track circuit, so maybe shame on me a bit for that one. But it was more known. He was more known as the route runner of this class, and maybe he's not going to beat you with the speed, but maybe beating with his route running. But no, it may be both. I mean, he may be the total package receiver Florida has here, and it is good to hear a true freshman come in, early enrollee, especially at a position of need for Florida, where a position for Florida needs as many playmakers as they can get, because there's not just many to rely on right now. So, look, we should be hearing about some of the younger wide receivers through spring practice. This is their chance to break through. This is the chance that they're going to have more so than fall camp, unless they break through in spring camp or early in fall camp. And hopefully, I know we talked about it earlier today, is who besides Pearsall and Henderson, who are we looking at for that third spot there at the wide receiver position? Is it a Jaquavion Frazier? Is it a Marcus Burt looking to break through? Or do we find ourselves with a true freshman making plays right away, much like Trevor Etienne last year? Is Andy Jean that true freshman that comes in and is playing immediately and making dividends, making plays day one, early on? I mean, Andy Jean does seem to be the freshman that is kind of garnering that attention.
Yeah, the other thing I was wondering about too, man, is what's up with Desmond Watson's weight? Did we ever get like a confirmation on what happened or anything like that?
Maybe he fibbed a little bit, because everything I was told, the weight on the roster online is true. So
he looks it.
Right. He's not hiding it. And I won't necessarily say he looks bad, but he does look heavy. He does look like a big guy. And maybe the weight thing is just going to be a struggle. Maybe that's just what Des Watson's going to be. It's just going to be a struggle with the weight.
It's all muscle, Dave.
There we
He
go.
gained all that muscle.
There we go. I'll take it.
Well, he played pretty good last year
Right.
at that weight.
Yeah.
A lot better than I was expecting, being as big as he was.
Yeah, I think he did pretty well, to be honest, even at that weight.
And that's the thing up front. You know, I bring up Cam Jackson. Then you got to bring in Caleb Banks as well, Des Watson, Chris McClellan. I mean, you're going to have to figure out, or they're going to have to figure out something where you don't have the Jervon Dexter situation last year of playing 60 plays a game. I mean, Florida's got to be deeper up front if they want to be effective. Now, of course, that means the players have to show up. You know, if there were other players they could rely on, I'm sure Jervon Dexter wouldn't have been out there 60 plays a game. But the reality was Florida just didn't have a lot of help around him. They weren't deep behind him. He had to be on the field, even playing, you know, whether it be closer to the middle or on the edge. He had to be out there a whole lot. So it's up to a lot of these players, the transfers, the young guys that need to develop to give themselves some more help so they're not out there 60 plays a game.
Say, get off the field on third down and you won't have to worry about it.
There you go. That's the that's obvious. That's check mark number one. That is check mark number one there.
That was my thinking right there, too. Oh, well, I know I said it, what was it, when Todd Grantham was let go? I said, well, it can't get any worse than Grantham. Then Tony came, and it kind of got worse. And I'm thinking to myself, well, it can't get worse than Tony. We'll see what Austin Armstrong can do now.
I'm cautiously optimistic. You know, the youth is there. That can hold some reservations, of course. But I like everything so far. Of course, that's what spring is kind of for. I mean, it's kind of hard to talk bad about the team right now. Spring practice is kind of just what it is. I think I said in the episode today, hope springs eternal. It's just the nature of spring practice a bit. But look, we're also fans of this team, and we're a lot of us are realistic, I think. A lot of us, I think fair and balanced for the most part in here. But this time of year, I think there's some cautious optimism. But we'll see. Yeah, that's just kind of what this time of year holds. I don't think, in the end, overall, I don't think we're, of course, all the good we hear, we're not sitting there and tying that to, all right, Florida's ready to beat Georgia. And then we're not saying that. But I did see the conversation earlier, and I forget what channel it was on here on the Discord, whether, wins equating to what kind of recruiting success, or even just wins of how happy you'll be to know maybe Billy Napier's on the right track for a certain amount of wins. I think this time of year is where we'll start talking about that, and some of the good that we hear maybe lending itself to maybe a win or two more than what you initially expected, or maybe you thought this team was heading the right way anyway. With all the changes going on with losing over 30 players and bringing in so many transfers and a change at quarterback and being able to rely on a run game, we'll see. We'll see what it all means. But right now, I'm glad there's a little bit of conversation towards maybe some of the good things that can happen with this team.
Yeah, I also like the fact that I can't say that I'm happy that some of the players that transferred out, because there were some that I was like, man, that sucks. Yeah. Like Donovan McMillan, some of those guys. But I am excited for the fact of like Billy Napier's getting in more of what he wants and some of his guys. And maybe, I said it that I don't think I think the buy-in was there. I'm not sure if the attitude was there with the buy-in because of just, obviously, a head coach is kind of like the father figure when you get to wherever you're going, and maybe Dan Mullen kind of etched in their brain his philosophies, and they were trying to learn Billy Napier's philosophies, and they just couldn't. They were taking shortcuts or whatever, because you see all of those people that got dismissed, like Cox and Bowman, and I think DeJuan Black also did too. But like, I think that they were trying, but it was kind of just like more of a mental thing with them. And I'm just excited, first of all, because I think there's going to be an attitude change for real. this time with more players. And on top of that, obviously, the transfers that Billy Napier brought in last year were the best players on the team. So that's kind of what makes me feel a little bit more optimistic about him getting in his guys too. But of course, you put up or shut up time when the season starts. You got to see it. But I'm cautiously optimistic from that standpoint.
Wasn't Jack Miller his transfer?
Yep.
Yeah, I kind of I look at that game though, man, and Miller, he was losing it. He had lost a lot of pieces. That offensive line wasn't the same with Torrance left. I can't really blame him for that whole game. But you can put some of the blame on him, but you can't put it all on him either.
That's fair. That's fair. I just wanted to kind of throw that out.
Yeah. But don't get me wrong. We do talk about the successful transfers, and most of them were successful, but. I wasn't a big Jack Miller fan when they brought him in. As Dave said, I'm not going to hold the spring game against him because of my notion that I already had on him. I can separate the two there, but I also think that was weird. You were bringing in a quarterback where I think that quarterback probably knew Anthony Richardson was going to be the guy. Of course, you're probably coming up and playing for second fiddle there, so I'm not so sure. The type of quarterback Billy Napier could have brought in last year to go head-to-head with Richardson because it was kind of a foregone conclusion he was going to be the guy. But if we are going to give him a whole lot of credit for a lot of the transfers he did bring in and is bringing in, we can bring up Jack Miller.
Right, and I just want to say that ETN and Osiris Torrance were by far the best players on that team, and both were Billy's guys.
Yeah, Johnson, Torrance, ETN as a true freshman, Pearsall. Yep. So now we need to see Caleb Banks and Cam Jackson and Micah Mazuka and George Goodwin. That battle there at right tackle. I think there's plenty of opportunities of guys to go out there as transfers and prove they're going to be instant contributors. And continuing on with Pearsall this year as well as leading that wide receiver core. There's gonna, Billy's plan. We're gonna see it this year. All the transfers he's bringing in, they're going to have to play integral parts, and it will be disappointing these guys that he's brought in that we are thinking going to be instant contributors. Not only just contribute, but also at the same time be difference makers.
Yeah, you're not going to hit on every kid that you bring in, but the hope is that you hit on more kids than what the last staff did, bringing them in.
The last staff started off good with the transfer portal too.
Yeah, they did. They did.
So, do you think the depth of the roster is substantially better than Billy's first year going into his second year?
Ooh. That is a good question. Defensively up front, yeah, in some ways, I do think so. Cam Jackson replacing Jervon Dexter in some ways. I think maybe he can be a versatile piece along with Jervon Dexter, but I think maybe if you can settle him into maybe one position there up front. If Des Watson can play more snaps, you bring along Chris McClellan, who should be further along. Banks to come in there at the same time, and then to go along with the experience that Powell Ryland and Newman Mielen bring back. That they got back a lot of experience last year. I do think up front for Florida on the defensive side, I think you can maybe consider them deeper up front on the defensive line, maybe even deeper on the offensive line, even after losing Tarquin and Ethan White. They still might be a bit deeper. Josh Braun last year, we figured he was a depth piece last year, but they didn't have to go rely on him a good bit last year. We didn't see him play a whole lot last year. And so I do think there's a potential, at least in the trenches. Florida is actually deeper this year, going with the starting five this year, and I do think they feel pretty comfortable with 8 or 9 guys behind those starting five for the offensive line. Receiver, we'll see. I think that's a kind of a toss-up there. Quarterback at the same time, if Mertz can play well, maybe it's a wash. Running back, I think, can be deeper. Secondary, maybe not as deep, but hopefully still better. if Miguel Mitchell, Kamari Wilson at safety can be an improvement over what we saw last year, they're going to have, I mean, they need to be, but behind them, there's not much to point to. And cornerback, yeah, I can say it's about the same as it was last year. So I do think in a lot of ways, linebacker too, I think they can they maybe can be deeper this year too. So yeah, maybe the depth is more there this year. Now, a lot of that depth isn't experienced.
Right. Well, I was kind of curious if they were going to go look into like safeties or anything like that during this second transfer portal part of the season.
Yeah, I do think so. I think safety is still a spot that they will try to hit. Maybe even another offensive lineman.
With the departure of Tony, do we know if we're going to go out and try and get a safeties coach?
I don't think so. I mean, you don't have a spot for one now.
So Corey Raymond's going to do the double duty.
Yes.
Okay. Well, and hopefully the secondary will be better if the front seven can actually put pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, hopefully a better front and one voice on the back end lends itself to a better defense.
So it sounds like I can pencil you in for 15 wins, Dave.
National championship, Heismers. Let's go.
I still think they could even hit receiver again in the portal. There's still room on this roster. Do they go after another tight end? I mean, look, Boardingham's another name. Speaking of spring storylines, I keep hearing about him coming out of every practice, and hopefully that's not one of those. Just because of the position. Hopefully that's not one of those names that we keep hearing about in practice behind the scenes that doesn't show up. Hopefully Arlis Boardingham is a tight end they can count on with Odom and Zipperer in that mix. But tight end, safety, I think edge rusher. I mean, I think you have to throw that one in there too. Powell Ryland, like as I said, is the only proven guy they have there. I think we like the potential of maybe a Scooby slide in there and playing some, as Billy Napier said, a Jack Pyburn as a young player. But if there is a way in this second portal window you can go get somebody who's a little more proven, I think you go out there and go get them. So receiver, edge rusher, safety, maybe another tight end. I do think there are some openings for Florida to continue to hit the transfer portal after spring practice.
I mean, aren't we still going to take another quarterback too?
Oh yeah, I mean, I know they had that. I forget his name, but that preferred walk on. I don't think that's what Napier was talking about in trying to go get another quarterback. So no, I don't think so. Quarterback is another one. Of course, I think we should throw in there based on Napier's comments.
You're talking about that walk-on from IMG, right? I forget his name.
Yeah.
One of those guys at Ole Miss got to be transferring out after spring practice.
Well, here's the thing. They brought in two that have already transferred, so they have to sit out a year. Walker Howard, transferred from LSU, so if he transfers again, he's got to sit out a year. Spencer Sanders ain't transferring, so, not after he transferred in and how late in his career he is. And who do they have there now? Is it still Jackson Dart?
I don't think he went to the league. No.
Right, so, and didn't he already transfer from USC? So whoever transfers away from Ole Miss has got to sit a year.
JT Daniels, Dave. JT Daniels.
Didn't he transfer again? Or was he?
Yeah, he's on his fourth school.
Am I making that up? Hold on. I'm going to make sure I'm not making that up.
So I think it was Georgia. Then he it was USC, Georgia,
West Virginia.
And then now I can't remember what school he transferred
to. He
to.
did transfer again, right? Let me see. Yes, he's at Rice now. Wow.
Insane.
His fourth program in six-year collegiate career. Oof.
That's too much moving for me, man. Like, I would just be like, dude, I'm done. I'll just stay here.
Oof. Yeah.
Parker Lease was the name of that.
There you
walk-on
go.
for
Yes.
Pedro thinking of. But I'm actually surprised that Max Brown isn't higher up there, because you say what you will about Jim McElwain, but he could pick quarterbacks.
Yeah, and
Max Brown was his top pick.
And Will Miles is higher because Will's got his own little parameters that he likes to pick from, and the high school stats based on that. Will's a big fan of one Max Brown. So
yeah, Max Brown, he passed for like 68 touchdowns at a 72% completion rating.
Yeah,
He was. Now I don't know what division he was playing in or how easy it is, but it doesn't even really matter. I mean, like, you play in a division, you're going to play with probably the same or equivalent as talent as the other team. So, I mean, I looked at it. I was just like, dude, like, even when he got Max Brown in the transition class, I was just like, you look at his ranking, you're like, okay, he just got some guy that he could scoop up. But you go on Max Preps, you look at his stats, you're like, wow, he actually has really good high school stats.
I mean, I've heard he's doing some good things too in spring. So showing some good things. Jack Miller showing some good things on the run as an athletic quarterback. So, but from everything I can put together, it is Graham Mertz taking most of the 1 reps right now.
Isn't Max Brown pretty athletic too?
I think so. I don't think he's.
I wonder if they would do a 2 quarterback system at all and get him moving on the run and stuff. It's like a little curveball.
Yeah, maybe so. Getting some experience too, but
yeah.
I'd like to see him be out or at least win the number 2 job.
Yeah, I don't think
I mean, we've seen Jack Miller and David mentioned the bowl game can't really judge everything off that one game, but still, I there was nothing that really impressed me with Jack Miller. So I don't think there's anything. There's some unlocked potential there with him.
Agreed.
He's the backup. So
I was going to say that I went back and I watched. He was actually pretty decent at throwing on the run, but when you have no offensive line, you're going to have to run for your life anyway. So
yeah, well, he had to do a lot of throwing on the run that game, but still, I don't see him. I definitely don't see him competing for the number 1 job. So it's Max Brown or him for number 2, and then whoever we bring in from the portal will have a chance to compete for that number 2 spot. Is the way I look at it.
Yeah, my thing about Jack.
I'd like to see Brown get a shot at number 2.
Yeah, but my thing about Jack Miller is, if in the right part of the schedule, if Mertz was to get injured or something like that, in the right part of the schedule, could he lead Florida to a win? Sure he can. And there's enough talent, on the roster, depending on who Florida is playing, that he could lead Florida. The defense, of course, has got to play better. They probably have to play a really good game for that to happen. But I don't think it necessarily would have to be the disaster we saw in the bowl game. But I think, for Florida to reach their potential, and they still may not reach that potential, but to me, for Florida to reach whatever the ceiling is for this team, I think Graham Mertz is glad to be the quarterback leading them.
With regard to Brown, he had 80 kids in his graduating class.
Oh, yeah.
So not a big school, but hey, just 2 words to think about. Kyle Trask. Could be a hidden gem down the bench.
Every 2 3-star quarterback will be compared to one Kyle Trask.
That's right.
Especially if they're from Texas, which Max Brown is not.
That's like 1A in Texas, isn't it? That's
he's not from Texas.
No,
he's from,
right.
Oklahoma.
Right. Yep.
Oklahoma. Well, okay.
That's even smaller.
Yeah, probably 2A in Oklahoma.
Yeah, and speaking of Texas, I looked at I always look every year to see where the most talent comes from, and usually it's Florida. Like this year, the high school talent's all coming from the state of Texas. It's crazy. I don't think I've ever seen it like that before.
Yeah, I noticed that too when looking through some recruiting stuff. The state of Florida, not as friendly this year, which is why I was really hoping the 23 class, that we would capitalize on 23 class, because the 23 class was loaded in the state of Florida. Not as friendly this year.
Well, that's happened before, but then it comes down to the draft day, and more people are drafted from the state of Florida than anybody else, and it's not close.
Going back to Miller just real quick, if we're going to give him credit for having a terrible offensive line in the bowl game, Mertz had a terrible offensive line basically his whole time at Wisconsin.
And a terrible system.
Yep. I'm eager to see how all this plays out. I mean, I think, we've all done it here. I know Seth Varnador's done it as well. I mean, we've all kind of pointed to, maybe just how much of a hindrance Wisconsin was. I'm eager to see, is there something to unlock? Is there untapped potential in one Graham Mertz?
It's fun. If for everyone who hasn't watched Seth Varnador's video, I encourage you to do so because he really breaks it down. But one thing you'll notice is that he has to take 4 plays from this game, 5 plays from this game,
Yeah.
3, because there's no game that he can just focus on. Well, he passed, 6 times in this quarter, 4 times in this. No, he maybe passed 6 times in the entire game.
And 5 of those were on third down.
Right.
Yeah, I ran a statistic on his time at Wisconsin. I think they ran the ball 62% of the time, and he threw for 37. And then he had pressure. He was pressured 31% of the time on that 37% when he was throwing.
He's brutal.
Like I said, and 2 things. My favorite saying, and you guys have shared it too. 2 things can be true at the same time. The Wisconsin offense didn't do him any favors, and at the same time, he didn't do them any favors. That can be true. That can be true, but I hope it's not.
Yeah, his touchdown to interception ratio is still pretty awful. I mean, you can attribute that to the offensive line, but at some point, the quarterback's got to be able to not let that happen,
Yeah, there are a few times in Seth's video, and then when I went back and watched too, there were some throws. I'm just like, who are you throwing to? Or why are you throwing that? I was just like, this time you do have a clean pocket. And you're either throwing late and the ball gets picked, or it's just inaccurate. And so, now maybe he's trigger shy. Maybe he did a little bit gun shy there from an offensive line that gives up a ton of pressure, and he's just expecting pressure and it never comes, and he forces a throw anyway. And there's so many ways to look at that, but there are times where I even looked at it and was like, I don't get why there is a bad throw there.
So he's not going to win the Heisman?
He's going to finish second, Bull.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest concern is the turnovers. I mean, quarterback play, completion percentage. I mean, him versus AR, yes, they're different style quarterbacks, but the system that they're going to be in, I mean, it's just protect the football. I mean, I feel it'll be a better situation than he's in Wisconsin. He's not he's not the athlete that AR was, so it's going to be a little bit different. The production will come from a different way. I feel it'll be better if he can just protect the football, doesn't turn it over, then I think we'll be okay on offense with Graham Mertz. I mean, I'm not expecting, top 10 in the country, 40 points a game or anything, but I think I feel like it'll be same amount of production or better than last year, just because of the inconsistency we had with AR.
Yeah, and that type of offense can work if you're running the ball well on first and second down. And Florida could be asking him to throw on third down, but hopefully it's 3rd and 3 or 3rd and manageable, and not 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. Hopefully, there is times where Florida's just dominating running the ball on first and second down, and you're just asking him to convert some third downs. But we know in today's college football, you need a quarterback that can move the chains, that can carry the offense to a point, throw on first down successfully. I mean, Florida's not going to be able to run the ball on first down all the time.
Yeah, I just hope if he does have a really, really good spring game that it doesn't compare to Luca Del Rio when he had a good spring game and then he came out and just did not look good at all.
Well, Anthony Richardson had a really good spring game last year too.
Amazing spring game.
Maybe they need bad spring games. Didn't Trask always have like really terrible spring games?
Actually, Trask looked pretty good in the spring games, and it always brought up the question, oh, why didn't he get a chance to start?
I remember that last one, though. I guess it was 2019. He did throw that pick six to Huggins.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, that's the one that stands out to me was that. But I don't think I think Franks was still, obviously Franks was still a starter then. But yeah, let's just hope they have bad spring games, and then when the regular season starts, they're really good.
All right, guys, I'm going to end it on this. I put the poll up on Twitter, and it's got already 1,444 votes. Do you like the hire of Billy Gonzalez as wide receiver coach? 83.8% say yes. There we go. Pretty good barometer, I guess. Had about 1,500 fans.
Yeah, I don't know. I came in later, I guess, but I like it. Like,
Dave, you showed up late. No excuse.
Yeah, it was weird at first. I think what really made some fans like standoffish was because it was just kind of weird because he was, told to go somewhere else. He brings in Kerry Colbert, but then Billy Gonzalez comes back. But if you look at it beforehand, when Napier came in, everybody was upset Billy Gonzalez was leaving. But now you got people saying, why are we hiring him back? Thought y'all were upset we let him go.
And not everybody was on board with the Colbert hire either, and thought that turned out better than most expected.
I heard I know Phil McGowan was like a big name that was supposed to be.
Yeah,
I guess they were interviewing.
Yeah, I did bring that up.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I don't either. I did bring that up. I have no idea what happened there.
To be honest, I would have liked either one. But so I'm not even upset by it. I'm actually I'm reserved, but as you said, that every recruit has to pass through Billy Napier. So I mean, that's obvious. And it's going to be a different staff. It's not like he's going to be with Dan Mullen's staff again. So I think a lot of people freaked out over that part too. But you got to look at it for the overall spectrum of everything. Like Billy Napier is going to be, doing everything. So it's not going to be like it was with Dan Mullen.
Agree. That should be the process there. All right. I will call it, guys. Thanks for hopping on. I know it was a little bit short notice, but I think with all the news going on, I couldn't go by without a chat because a lot of these were polarizing subjects, especially with Billy Gonzalez, the Utah game being moved on a Thursday night and some spring storylines. So it was time I was going to do it anyway, but no better time with all the news coming out on this Tuesday to get your guys' thoughts. And everybody in here, thanks for hopping on this little chat. Thanks for being Gators Breakdown Plus members. If you haven't joined Gators Breakdown Plus yet, be sure to join. The link is in the description. We'll keep that conversation going on right there on the Discord. But everybody, thank you so much for joining us right here on this preview of what we do right here on Member Chats on Gators Breakdown Plus.